the guy who used his Tinder dates to peddle conspiracy theories, the multiple dates who might have been serial killers, the girl with a collection you'll never be able to unsee, the most wholesome and weird twist ending of the century. And these are somehow the most normal hookups. We'll be showing the ugly side of dating on today's episode of the Infographic Show. Horrifying Tinder matches gone horribly wrong. Number 25. A 3 a.m. nightmare. Our first Tinder user got a match she was lucky to survive. She was talking to a guy online who seemed pleasant enough, so she was looking forward to meeting him. One day he came to visit her, in the middle of the night during her late shift job. So at 3 a.m. while she was on her break, she joined him in his car, where he made the not-so-smooth move of showing her pictures of real dead bodies on his phone. Naturally, she made her excuses and got out of there, and never saw him again. But it's not just men that can get scary. Number 24. Along came a spider. A male Tinder user decided to spend a passionate night with a lady he met on the app, only to realize she was much freakier than him. They both decided to take hallucinogenic mushrooms, and then the real freak show began. In the words of the user, she was a biter, and it was like having sex with a giant spider. Needless to say, I didn't have a great time, and she kicked me out. He spent the next few hours in his car, tripping anxiously and trying to come down. The next morning, he found that his body was covered in bite marks. And that is still somehow more normal than what happens next. Number 23. After the cat funeral. Our next unfortunate woman on Tinder met a man who was in the middle of a difficult situation. His cat was very sick. She was a sympathetic ear for her over messenger, and he told her at great length how much his cat meant to him. The faithful feline was there for him when nobody else had been, and he didn't know how he'd be able to go on without it. Well, that's not quite true. He had one option. His potential date could take the place of his cat. At this point, she was naturally terrified of this guy, and when he invited her to attend his cat's funeral as a first date, she politely declined. That turned out to be a good call. The next message he sent her was a deranged rant about how he had eaten his cat's ashes so he could be with her forever. It's probably best we just move on after that. Number 22. Ushering in the horrors. After 3 dates with a woman he had a lot in common with, a Tinder user had to cancel on an upcoming date due to a family matter, and that's when his match got ugly. She sent him a 7-page message saying that he had just ruined their chances of having a perfect relationship because he couldn't put her first. She already planned on marrying him and spending the rest of her life with him. Just to repeat, they had been on 3 dates. If that wasn't enough, she sent over a voicemail of her singing Usher's "You Got It Bad" while sobbing profusely and saying that she loved him on repeat. Just one day after that, she sent a video of her burning a bucket list that she'd written for them together. It was over. Probably a lucky escape on that one. Number 21. Murder on the porch. One Tinder user felt like he was punching above his weight when he got a match with a spectacularly attractive lady. Little did he know, she was harboring darkness in her heart. After a nice date at a hibachi restaurant, he took her back home, and that's when she noticed a toad sitting on his porch. He explained that he liked the toad and treated him as a kind of pet. Then, while keeping eye contact with the man, she stomped the poor toad to death, then explaining that she felt that his anger afterwards would make the sex better. And it didn't end there. He kicked her off his property, and when he couldn't get her to leave, he sprayed her with a hose. But this spurned lover would not give up. She broke back into his property via the backyard after pulling some fence posts out of the ground. It took calling the police to actually get rid of her. Speaking of situations that make you want to call the police. Number 20. Three's a crowd. This story starts off well, almost like a fairy tale. A guy in his mid-20s had secured a date with an attractive mother in her mid-30s through Tinder, and they were going to have a Netflix and chill date together. But did this Tinder guy and his MILF live happily ever after? Not quite. When he turned up at the gal's house, he was shocked to find a 40-year-old man sitting on her couch, staring absently into the TV with her young son. Already, that's a yikes. But it got worse when she insisted on dragging the Tinder guy down to the basement. She explained that she could sleep with whoever she liked. In the words of the man himself, "So we go at it while her husband and son watch TV. She was being obnoxiously loud. Great sex, but super awkward, especially leaving. Made eye contact with the dude on the way out. He just looked dead in the eyes, like a defeated look. Never went back. But he's not the only one who's gonna have defeat in his eyes." Number 19. Fancy seeing you here. An interesting thing about Tinder is that you can list your careers in your bio, which might help you meet like-minded people or other folks in your field. For one woman, that meant sharing that she was a corrections officer, meaning someone who works in a prison. She met what seemed like a charming enough guy and went on a few dates with him until he suddenly ghosted her. It's not nice, but it's also not exactly an uncommon thing to happen on dating sites. She moved on and probably thinking she'd never see him again. But to her surprise, she saw him at work. He was now an inmate being admitted to her prison. That must have been a fun day on the job. We can think of one building scarier than a jail cell, though. Number 18. The Redneck Mansion. Sometimes the horrors of a Tinder date reveal themselves when you bring them home. Sometimes you realize what a nightmare you were in when you go back to their place. That was the case for one Tinder user who got in way over his head on the first and last Tinder date he ever went on. He picked up his date at Starbucks, and while she didn't look like her pictures, she was fun to hang out with, so he didn't mind. That was until he went to her place. It was the smell that hit him first. Every single inch of her home reeked of cat pee. The woman also had a pet chihuahua, which she yelled at and hit on the nose right in front of her date. And when she showed him her collection of adult toys with animal tails hanging off of them, he decided enough was enough. He made up a lie that his grandma was dying and he ran for the hills. Speaking of family matters, number 17. A female Tinder user had just shared a nice meal with her date and now was heading back to his place for a night of passion. He had just one rule: they should keep it down. The date had roommates that went to bed pretty early and he didn't want to wake him up, which seemed considerate. So they went back to his place and they had a night of fun but quiet sex. The next morning, she went downstairs to get some breakfast, and in the process, she met the guy's roommates. They just happened to be his parents. The guy's mom was cooking breakfast and she offered to make up a plate for her, which she accepted out of a sense of awkwardness. And she would henceforth always remember that day as the day she had an incredibly strange breakfast with the parents of a one-night stand that she barely knew. But as you'll find out in our next story, sometimes there are benefits that come with still living with your parents. Number 16. The new roommate. It's not uncommon to ask each other questions on your first date. In fact, you probably should, if you don't want your date to think you're a self-obsessed egomaniac. But one Tinder user felt a little nervous when her first-time Tinder date very eagerly asked her whether she still lived with her parents. She answered that no, she didn't, and that's when he made his follow-up offer. He needed a place to stay, so while he couldn't offer any money to be her new roommate, he'd be happy to pay in sex. Sadly, this date did not end in him having a new place to live. Speaking of parents, though, number 15. The father of all Tinder nightmares. This one unfolded over a long period of time and ended in the most insane way imaginable. A young man was dating a girl and had a long-time rivalry with her father. The two of them always argued, and it seemed that the dad had it out for the son the whole time. So, when he ended the relationship, getting to escape the company of the father was at least one benefit. Years later, he decided to try out Tinder and met a girl that he really liked. As the months passed and things got more serious, it was time to meet the girl's family, her mother, her stepfather, and her little sister. And to his horror, he found out upon meeting them that the girl's stepdad was the same dad of the previous girl who had given him all that trouble. Number 14. A whirlwind romance. Sometimes when you fall in love, you fall hard and fast. But before you know it, it's all over and all you have left is a broken heart and a lot of questions. This happened to one young woman on Tinder whose date gave her her first kiss. It was like a real-life love story, but it wasn't meant to be. Our love-struck woman received a text message from her beau telling her that he'd been arrested, and that was the last she ever heard from him again. Was this Romeo really locked up, or was it just an elaborate ploy to ghost her? We will never know. Now, from a date who was arrested to a date who probably should be arrested. Number 13. Dark Alley Date. A black woman using Tinder, sadly her race will be relevant soon, met a guy who seemed pretty swell. They hit things off and they chatted for a few weeks before deciding to meet up in a coffee shop. She arrived on time and was waiting inside for her date, but there was no sign of him. 10 minutes later, she got an ominous message saying, "Come outside." So she did, where her date met her wearing a dark hoodie. He told her to follow him down a dark alley, and when she got the sixth sense that he was going to dahmer her, she decided to call that date off and just leave. The next day, she received a series of messages from him, threatening her and calling her racial slurs. So her instinct was right, not going down that dark alley, or we might not be telling this story right now. Let's get a little less dark and a lot more embarrassing. Number 12. The Facebook Hustler. Not all of these Tinder matches are near misses with would-be serial killers. Sometimes they're just close encounters with absolutely god-tier cringe lords. Such was the case for one woman who matched with an aspiring rapper on Tinder and agreed to meet him for a date. Once there, he proudly pulled out his phone and made her watch a series of homemade rap videos, complete with questionable lyrics and low-res visuals. Then, in a bold move that redefined secondhand embarrassment, he took her phone and tried to like his own Facebook page from her account. You gotta at least appreciate his Sigma male grind set on that. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Speaking of people you will hate though. Number 11. Who starts a conversation like that? Somehow, even the SoundCloud rapper seems classy compared to this next guy. After not having a date in a while, our female Tinder user was pretty happy to match with a nice-seeming man on the app. After the usual pleasantries, she decided to go out to dinner with him. Before they'd even ordered their drinks, she mentioned that she hadn't gone out to eat in a while because she was saving up money for a washer and dryer. Times are tight and every little bit helps. But rather than agree, her date went in a different direction. In the woman's own words, he told me instead of saving up for that, I should save up for a boob job. I don't even know how to reply, so he follows up with, "No, it's not a bad thing. My sister and mom got boob jobs and they look amazing." Do we even need to tell you that she didn't stick around after that? Speaking of guys with weird relationships to their family. Number 10. Dinner with the fam. Rather than going out for an expensive dinner, one Tinder user decided it would be nice to go on a romantic walk with her new date. She thought that it was going well, until he suddenly said that the walk was boring and he had a better idea. For their next date, they should have a home-cooked meal. It's not a bad suggestion. Then, according to her, this happened. I agreed, and then he said he wanted to cook us dinner together for his parents, grandparents, and brother. I told him I barely knew him and I wasn't ready for that, so it wouldn't work out. And he sent me an invoice for $100 for wasting his time going on a walk with him. Seems like a weird way to get to the bag, but okay. Our next Tinder nightmare is also someone you really wouldn't want to have dinner with. Number 9. Plenty to chew on. At first it seemed perfect. When they matched on Tinder, he seemed charming, witty, and they had so many common hobbies and interests. To a female user, her date seemed perfect, but there was something he was hiding underneath it all, a truth that would be a little tough to break. When they met up for a date, it was impossible to avoid. He didn't have any teeth. According to his own claim, a hack dentist had lied to him that he needed all of his teeth removed, and they did the surgery, leaving him with pure gums. He couldn't afford dentures yet, so he was left toothless in the meantime. She tried to overlook this, but when the food was served, his gumless state caused him to spit all over the food. When she started thinking about what a big thing this was to keep from her, she wondered what else he might be hiding, and she didn't want to be around to find out. The relationship ended there, but our next one exploded so fast you would think that he was trying to speedrun it. Number 8. Away with words. A female Tinder user with a larger frame matched with a guy who seemed pretty cool, funny, charming, and up for a night out. They hit it off in the chat, so they decided to meet up in person. But according to her, things took a nosedive the moment they met. We met up at a bar. He saw me, and the first words he said to me were, "Oh, I didn't know you were fat." So I turned around and walked out. It was probably the best date she never had. At least he wasn't as downright terrifying as this next one. Number 7. The Watcher. Not every Tinder horror story comes from straight couples. One Tinder female user was searching for a relationship with another woman, and she found a potential partner that seemed promising. But things quickly got horrifying when they decided to meet up for a coffee date. She arrived at the coffee place and waited for her date, but she never turned up. Weird. And that's when she started receiving messages with an unsettling admission. The person she was going on a date with didn't exist. The whole thing was actually a catfishing scheme from a freaky voyeuristic dude with a fetish for lesbians. He admitted that he had no intention of speaking to her in public. Instead, he just wanted to lure her out to a public space so he could watch her from a distance, and then started ranting about how it was a terrible shame that she was a lesbian because he was very attracted to her. That feeling was obviously not mutual. Number 6. Up in smoke. One unlucky lady met a guy on Tinder who seemed sweet and considerate. He even reached out before the date to check what she was wearing so he could wear something similar. He seems like a real catch. But as you can guess, when the date started, everything went wrong. When the fledgling couple sat down for dinner, this hippie Romeo handed over a baggie of weed as a gift. And before they could even order, he started sharing his theories about life. The interplay of molecules and energy, and the way that the kind of lights we use are actually the government giving us cancer, as well as other weird pseudoscientific babble. He also didn't eat because as part of his diet, he fasted for 23 hours a day. There was not a second date, but hey, at least she scored some free weed. And now, for a case of chronic harassment. Number 5. The Doppelganger. One man had an extremely unusual Tinder nightmare, mostly because he'd never actually signed up for Tinder. So imagine his surprise when he found out that there was an account using his name, his photo, and chatting to random women online. To make matters worse, he was happily married, and this rogue profile was starting to raise some serious eyebrows at home. As it turns out, this wasn't a case of identity theft, it was a sabotage mission. The Tinder account had been created by his vengeful ex-wife, who was hell-bent on wrecking his new marriage. Thankfully, the man and his wife saw through the scam, hired a private detective to look into the ex's activities, and eventually struck her with stalking charges for his trouble. But it's not just male divorcees that can get into scary situations on Tinder. Number 4. The Amateur Detective. The daughter of an older woman on the tail end of a divorce told the tale of how her mom's attempts to get back into the dating game turned into an absolute nightmare. She wasn't looking for a committed relationship, just a quick rebound that would help her regain some confidence, something that would be easy for her to do as a businesswoman who traveled around the country. She found a guy who seemed nice to her, despite her more internet-literate daughter seeing the red flags, and decided to spend some time with him. She then described the horror that follows. Somehow, in the 4 hours they are physically together, he figures out which flight that she's taking the next day. He used that to find her final destination, and somehow even finds her home address. He uses the public tax information to find her full name, and from there hunts her down on Facebook. And finds my dad, calls him on the phone, and dishes everything. Sends him pictures and screenshots of the convos, and then starts sending my mom harassing messages that he loves her but he can't trust her. She had to get the police involved after that, which would have been a good choice for our next scenario too. Number 3. Mr. President, a second message has hit the app. A woman who's been on both sides of a Tinder nightmare reported going on a date with a deranged conspiracy theorist who used their dinner to spew his many ideas about how the truth was being hidden by the government. She told him that this was an appropriate dinner conversation, but that didn't stop him. Sharing his theories was just that important. She broke it off after that, but Mr. Tinfoil Hat wasn't done. For the next few months, he kept calling her at 3 a.m. pretending to be representatives from furniture companies who had difficulty fulfilling her order as a way to get her address. What is it with these guys doing freaky stuff at 3 a.m.? The same woman did admit she's not always been the perfect Tinder date either, saying, "When I was someone's Tinder nightmare, I got way too drunk, puked on myself, total blackout." That's still a better outcome than our next one. Number 2. The Uber Catfish. One young man decided to give Tinder a whirl at 18 years old and got a really unpleasant first-time experience. He met a girl who claimed to live in the local area, and after chatting for a while, they agreed to meet at a local pizza place. However, after he arrived, he noticed that she wasn't there. Time passed, she still didn't show up. He started to suspect that he'd been stood up, or worse, catfished. The latter suspicion was confirmed when the girl reached out and said that she needed some financial help to pay for her Uber into town. The unfortunate Tinder user explained what happened next. She didn't want any actual money, she wanted $50 worth of Steam gift cards to pay for the Uber. I blocked the account, paid for my drinks and walked out, deleted Tinder shortly after and have not been back on it since. We can't really blame him after that. Number 1. The Twist of the Century. A 21-year-old man named Chris thought that he'd found the perfect match on Tinder. Dolly, an attractive girl who was into heavy metal and working on cars. It was almost too good to be true, and well, it kinda was. But that's when the twist came in. There was no Dolly. Chris had actually matched with a guy named Connor. Had he been catfished? Surprisingly, no. Turns out, a weird Tinder glitch showed Connor that Chris was a 20-year-old Asian woman named Sybil. Confused but curious, they started talking and exchanged screenshots to figure out what had gone wrong. Tinder had unintentionally catfished them both. But here is the second twist. Since they had so many common interests, Chris and Connor added each other on Facebook. No romance, just a solid new friendship born from one of the weirdest Tinder bugs of all time. Sometimes the algorithm messes up, but in the best way possible. Ever had a date so bad it felt like a scene from a horror movie? Or maybe just hilariously awkward? Share it in the comments below. Now check out Women Reveal What's the First Thing They Notice About a Guy, or watch this instead.